We are here in this Musimagem conference, this debate about women in film music. And we have here a great team of women composer. I'm so honored to be here with them. And we are with Catherine Joy, Heather McIntosh, and Allyson Newman, the three composer. They live in LA, but you are not all from LA. I think we will talk about it later. And I am Marion Lemonnier. I'm French, but I work for Global TV for 20 years now. Global Play, Global News, and General Global. I'm a music composer too. And I'm really glad to introduce to you those people because they have great careers. And as woman composer, I love to be inspired by great women composers. And I really would like to hear from every one of you your story, your career. I would like to know the way you came to music and how music is living through you. Let's start with you, Catherine.
Well, thank you so much, Marion, and the whole festival. I mean, it's so incredible to be a part of this and to be part of the concert you had a few nights ago was an incredible honor. So really appreciate you having all three of us here. I'm Catherine Joy. I was the previous president of the Alliance for Women Film Composers, and Heather and Ally are now the current presidents. And I am all the way from Tasmania, Australia. So I now live in LA. I've been in the States for like 25 years now, but grew up in Australia. And my background has always been music. My mom was a concert pianist and had a very musical family. Both of my siblings played instruments, but I was definitely destined to follow in my mother's footsteps. And when I was growing up, I thought maybe that was being a classical musician as she was, but I figured out pretty quickly that that wasn't going to be something for me. I was terrible at practicing. I was a singer and a violinist, but did not enjoy being in the practice room very much, struggled with that. And it's so interesting because I went to a really good school. I actually went to the same school my mom did, which had a really strong music program, and it was a girls' school. And, at that school, we were told we could do anything, women power, girls can do anything guys can do. But one of the jobs on that list was not composing. It was not in my purview that early on in my life. And it really took a while for me to figure out that being a composer was something I could be, because every composer we studied was a guy, and I couldn't, there was no women composers, performing pieces like at the, on the orchestral level or the concert level. You didn't hear them on the radio. So there wasn't very many examples of women composers, and it really took me a while. I actually came to the States to study jazz, and I studied under an amazing Brazilian composer and jazz pianist, Jovino Santos Neto, who was a huge influence on me. And it was through studying jazz when I was up in Seattle that I fell in love with composing. I wanted to be singing and performing music that really connected with me. And I started writing music. And then I was just like, oh, wow, I love writing. I love writing more than I love performing. I love writing more than I like practicing. For some reason, it was really hard to sit in the practice room and practice, but I could sit by myself and compose for hours. That was not a problem. And it took me a long while to get from that point to actually scoring for film. I was still really looking for a way, and I was still performing music a bit and teaching music. And while I was in the teacher's room, all my kids were away on a field trip, I was writing music for them, and an email came in about a film scoring class, just like a 1 night a week film scoring certificate program. And I was like, maybe this is it. Like, maybe this is how I can be writing music for a living. And the interesting thing about this story is that at this point, I was in my 30s. And I'd been doing music for a long time and still feeling like I didn't fit. I hadn't found where I was supposed to be in the music world. And I went to the first night of this, 1 night a week film scoring class where the teacher, who was Hummy Mann, best known for scoring Robin Hood Men in Tights, that funny Mel Brooks film. And he started talking about film composing. And he was like, not only is it writing music, but it's, it's serving the film, it's serving picture, it's being part of a team, it's networking, it's developing relationships with directors and producers, it's computer work, it's data management, it's data administration. He was like listing all these different things that, that's part of the job of being a media composer. And the incredible thing for me was not only, I think I can do all of those jobs, but also like my entire life to that moment, I felt like I'd been preparing me. So I didn't feel like I was late or that I'd wasted any time. I felt like even though I didn't know it, my life had been preparing me for this moment, and I was ready to become a film composer. And even though I had a lot more to learn, I was ready to jump in and learn, but I felt like, my life had prepared me for that moment. And that was a great lesson for me to learn, that you're never too late, like you are where you're supposed to be. And, you never feel like you have to catch up. It's just, it's just time to step into the next thing that life has for you. And that's exactly what I did. I just, I went to every film networking event. I met up with every composer who would talk to me. I'd buy them coffee and ask them a million questions. I just started scoring anything I could get my hands on. And I also started coming down to LA and getting to know the film community down here. But in Seattle, I joined the Seattle Composers Alliance. I became the vice president. I joined Women in Film. I joined their board. I started organizing all their events. I became part of their community, just like the community you have in Brazil, and became an active part of it, which really helped kind of launch me into that film scoring scene. And 2 years later, I moved down to LA and basically did the same thing down here. When we started the Alliance for Women Film Composers, I started volunteering for that organization, first as their executive director, and then I moved up to vice president and eventually to president. And being part of these communities was a huge part of helping me grow as a film composer. And so since then, I've just, I've scored a lot of really wonderful projects, documentaries and narrative films, and some video games as well. So it's been an incredible journey so far. And I still feel like I'm right at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great, Catherine. We have a message here from Antonio Teoli. You were just talking about him before we answered. And he's telling you that here from Los Angeles, I just want to say that Joy is a huge reference to all of us composers. It's a
Thank you so much, Jody.
I was preparing a little the debate, and I was reading that you, Catherine, have a passion for collaboration. And I think this is a huge thing because we really need this as composers. I mean, in Global TV, I am lucky to be directed by women and Black people and members of the LGBTQ community. And it's great to have them as directors because they are bringing great visions. And maybe we will talk about this later, but I would like after you talk about this collaboration, the way you put people together. I think it's important to talk about this here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to talk about, maybe we can hear Ally and Heather's stories. Talking about collaboration, I think, is something all three of us are very passionate about, and I think is perhaps the most fun part about, working, as you said, in media, the collaboration aspect of it.
We need that. So maybe Heather, do you want to present?
Hi, I'm Heather McIntosh, and I originally, fell in love with music as a little kid and played cello and piano. My mother is also a pianist and organist. And I feel like through the music program, they found that I always wanted to pick up another instrument and that I had an immediate facility of like, oh, well, you play cello. What if you just decided to play in the jazz band and play upright bass? And so then learning that instrument and then playing in the marching band and loving electronic music. I took synthesizer lessons as a child. At 10, I took my first synthesizer lessons where I was learning how to manipulate sound. And I was a huge fan of pop music. I didn't know where I was going to go with any of that stuff. I went to college. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and then moved to Athens, Georgia for college and went to a state school there, University of Georgia. I loved the band REM and the band the B-52s. They're from Athens, Georgia. And so I began studying concert music and being in love with pop music and working at the video store. And those were kind of the three things that like set me on my path of a love for film, a love for music, and a love for like a pop sensibility as well. So while I was working away in school studying the masters of, concert music, composition, avant-garde music, especially from mid-century, I loved so much. But of course, very few women that we were seeing in that. And I think about it often as I'm going through my career, how that feeling of there were always people that supported me, but I didn't see myself in those spaces. And so it really was like to try to find a connection with other artists that are doing the same thing has been really important for my career throughout all the stages, finding people in the concert music world, finding people in like the pop music realm, and finding people in our film music and film community to just connect with. After playing in bands in Athens, Georgia on indie rock records, played with a group called the Elephant Six Collective, which is sort of a psychedelic pop indie sounding series of bands from there, where a lot of the music is multi-tracked and shared amongst the community with 4-track cassette machines and limited resources, but finding your own sound through that. And moved on to playing with those bands and then played with Gnarls Barkley and Lil Wayne, the hip hop artist. So I played bass in live touring ensembles throughout the years. So I'm glad I picked up all those other instruments. If I stayed with just cello, who would have known? So I had this long touring career about, same with the way that Kath was talking about, the film music didn't show up right away. When I was first thinking about film, watching all those movies at the video store and learning about that, I didn't know how to, you think about John Williams, who I love, but how does one John Williams? Like he's such a legend. It's hard to just imagine like being in front of, 80 some odd orchestral members and getting to wield these giant sounds. But then I found through indie film, I saw these chamber pieces that were really special to me that, create all these wild dynamics. I found these different tones and ways to score for film. And I just started finding filmmakers. And after playing with all those pop bands, I went on to finding these filmmakers in the Southeast and scored a film that went to Sundance called Compliance with the director Craig Zobel. And with that, I moved to Los Angeles and never looked back. I began to find my community. But like I was saying before, it's insular. A lot of times you feel like you're just in your own world, writing music without it, you have to find your community. And I think that I was very fortunate to meet some folks and be able to share information and connect with them. But mine was a lot of self-study. I studied, concert music in college and watched a ton of films, but all of the film music I learned from books and connecting with other composers and finding resources like the Society of Composers and Lyricists and other composers in the industry as a reference, and just self-study, self-focused study to find my way. Exploration, yeah. So that's how I got into it.
Great. That's great. That's a great story. We have here a message by Alexei Kurjan, who says, I just want to say that I am so happy to have had the opportunity to arrange and conduct Catherine, Heather, and Allyson's music. Thank you so much for great music and for being such model for women film music composers. Oh yes, I totally agree with that. So Allyson, do you want to please, hello, welcome.
Hi. Thank you for that message. It's really nice. The concert was wonderful the other day, and the arrangements of Heather and I's piece from the L Word was so beautiful, and it was just so interesting to hear it in a different setting than what we have been living with it, for all this time. So it was really great, and we really appreciate the work that went into that. And yeah, it was just awesome. As you can hear from my accent, I'm also from another part of the world. Kath and I, somehow or other, both Australian girls, ended up, running this little organization somehow. I don't know what happened, but here you are. Yeah, maybe so. Part of that organization is, really, I mean, that's how Kath and I met each other. It's really, it's been such a welcoming and warm community, I think, that we all love and, benefit from, in all parts of our lives. My path is like a little bit more straightforward, I think. It's funny, we all have mothers that were musicians. My mother was also a concert pianist. My grandmother was an opera singer. So I also grew up in a musical household. It's funny how we all three have that in common with our mothers specifically. So I grew up playing classical music as a child, but I was always like getting in trouble for not practicing like Mozart the way as Mozart was meant to be practiced, and I was more interested in Elton John and things like this. And so I started, writing music when I was, probably about 12 or something. I was hugely into pop music and songs and stuff like that. So I was doing that, and I came to film music. I loved film, obviously, as a child growing up. I used to watch a lot of movies repetitively over and over. I don't know if you guys did that as well, but I had a lot of movies that I obsessed over, like a lot. And one film for me was of particular influence, which was A League of Their Own. And that was kind of like I think I must have been about 14 or 15 when that film came out. And it was the first time that I was really struck by score, in the sense that I suddenly went, oh, someone does that job. Like, someone has that job that they write the music that goes behind the film and tells the story of the film. And it was like a light bulb that went off, and I was like, great, I'm going to do that. And I also went to an all-girls school, and so I was always surrounded by women, always surrounded by girls. So I'm not sure that it wasn't probably until I got to college, and being university in the real world, that I realized that girls didn't actually rule the world. And it wasn't like just one perspective, which I think I somehow was sheltered from until all the way through high school. I then went on and I did undergraduate studies at the Conservatory in Sydney. I also came up sort of studying contemporary classical music. But I always wanted to do film scoring. That was always the through line. And so I eventually packed my bags and came to LA, and I went to USC and did the film scoring program there. And I would say that it's interesting because I hear like Catherine's story and Heather's story, and they've both done all these different ways, whereas mine's been like this one sort of straight trajectory. But it's even like, even though I kind of knew that that's what I wanted to do, it's not like it doesn't mean that it's been a more clear or simple path. It's been a very long, steady crawl to the place where I'm like, feel like I'm a real composer and I'm employed and make a living as a composer. It was not easy at all. So that's why I think it's interesting to think about like where you're at and what you're interested in. There is not one answer to it all, and so that's kind of basically my story. And then I think Heather and we kind of met also through some BMI connections, but we ended up at Sundance together with a film, and we became fast friends. And it was not long after that we started collaborating on the L Word together. And Heather had scored a indie film, Six Balloons, with Marja, who was the showrunner of the L Word. And when Marja called Heather up and said, "Hey, I've got this new show," Heather was like, "That's great, but I think you should have a queer composer on there as well," which is like, a very special thing for someone to do. So that's how we kind of basically started collaborating together. And like, it was a real like, oh, we're just going to jump off the cliff and do this kind of thing. But somehow it worked. But I think that we just had a real kind of sort of mutual respect for each other. And it's been really amazing. That collaboration is so fun. It's so important, especially working in television, which is so much work and so fast. And ultimately, you always need people helping you in that capacity. And so it's really nice to have someone who's like on the same page, and someone that is invested in it as much as you are. It's really great to be able to bounce those ideas off each other. And it's just fun. Heather and I always have so much fun, don't we?
I think, yes, we do. It is true. And it's wild too, because I had gone, I think part of like being a persistent person who wants to compose and work, that independence has always been something I've been so proud of. I'm an independent thinker. I want to do it all by myself. But the second I opened myself up to the possibility of this collaboration, it really opened up so much more. I feel like we're both better writers from it.
Oh God, totally.
And I think we're really, we've learned so much from having each other, and to be able to bounce ideas off each other, and to be a true team with ideas where it's built on respect first, and that collaboration is mutual, and we're honest with each other. We don't have any qualms about sharing our feelings. And it's
sugarcoating.
No. But it's beautiful that way. We really get to find the sound together. And I think about how, if I would have taken on that job by myself, like what opportunities I would have lost out on creatively, the ways that I've been able to push and learn about myself and the craft of writing for television. I feel like it is good to think about teams and who you bring in and who you're giving an opportunity and representation to. It really is exciting, and it makes your work better. I think that was the biggest takeaway for me.
Well, I think that's a huge part of it, right? Because like Heather, out of the three of us, you have the strongest background in bands, although Ally and I have also played in rock bands and jazz bands. And like the coolest thing about making music is doing it with other people. I mean, and when we start creating music, when we're young, we're creating it with other people. And I think composing for film originally was also a very collaborative, situation. But with the advent of computers and technology,
it's become very isolating.
Yeah, it's become a very lonely, isolating thing where people can like hide out in their composer caves, which all three of us are in our composer caves right now. You can be by yourself with your computer. You don't even have to these days collaborate with musicians. You can do everything in the box. You can, right? You can keep all
remotely.
Remotely. You can keep the budget for yourself, but if you open yourself up to collaboration, maybe you make less money, and collaboration always does come with complications, but I think it's such an enriching experience as a composer. It challenges you, it pushes out your boundaries, and it makes you stronger. And I think, for me, like I think this is just a composer trait. We're all control freaks, right? We all have really clear creative ideas that we want to see come to life. And I remember Sundance used to do these one day events where like all these composers would just load into a theater, and then they would watch one after the other big composers talk about their lives, and I went to a few of these. I was still living in Seattle, but I'd fly down for them. And I remember Thomas Newman I think he was first up, and he was talking about his process. And a huge part of his process is like he writes a bunch of ideas, but that he brings in a group of musicians who he's been working with for years, and he has them play through his ideas and talk to him about it and change things and give him feedback. And I remember listening to him talking about it, and my chest was getting really tight and my palms are getting sweaty. And like this idea of, especially that early in the process, opening yourself to like a bunch of, brilliant studio musicians for feedback totally freaked me out. And that the thought of writing with someone else totally freaked me out. And I was like, my first thought was, I need to do this because it's terrifying me. So I need to like lean into this fear. And I think that year I wrote my first feature project with another composer. He happened to be there with me at that Sundance event. And we scored a project together, which, like Heather and Ally do, involved, sending music back and forth and getting feedback. And I felt just through that process, I grew so much as a composer. But him bringing me onto that project, gave me more visibility, more connections. I think the other thing that used to be a norm that no longer is this idea of apprenticeship and mentorship and learning from someone else. And I feel like it's so important that we continue that tradition because it's a very powerful way of introducing people into the community, giving them visibility. It's a really important step in the journey of inclusivity, which is so important, for bringing women composers into the conversation, for bringing queer composers into the conversation, and inclusivity in general. How that's going to happen is through people having that openness to bring someone else into the collaborative process and giving them an opportunity.
Yeah. And that's like such a nice aspect of, I think, the alliance and the way that I think everyone in our organization is thinking about that in those terms kind of thing. And it is very satisfying to be able to like give people like an opportunity as well and see them succeed is really nice. I recently I had a filmmaker that I worked with a couple of years ago on a project that was at Tribeca, and she called me a few months ago and was like, I'm making a documentary for PBS about this group called the East West Players, which is a amazing a theater ensemble that's made up of Asian actors in downtown Los Angeles. And I was talking to her about it. She said, I'd like you to, to score it. And I was like, yeah, that's great. Of course, I'd love to. And then I was suddenly thinking, maybe this is something my assistant, Hua, who's wonderful, young, talented composer. She's from Taiwan, and she's been assisting me in the studio for about a year or more now, and I thought, oh, maybe she would love to write on this film. I think that this seems like what she should be doing, sort of thing. And so I just called up my director friend. I was like, listen, I've got this idea. What about if Hua writes the music and I'll just, make sure that everything kind of goes smoothly? And it did. It was amazing. And so she basically finished doing her first like feature film project. And it was so satisfying because she loved it so much. And it was great. And it's really interesting, like, that idea of mentorship and teaching people and showing them the ropes kind of thing. And it's like, I think it just, I don't know, I think it also makes you a better composer too, because it really makes you think about how you're doing things and what choices you're making. And it's always so interesting when other people, even younger composers who are less experienced, come up with ideas and you're like, oh, I hadn't actually thought about that. And like, it's so great. And suddenly you're like, oh yeah, right. And it's a really great thing to do. So I think, sharing like ideas and sharing experiences and, passing a baton on to someone and giving them opportunity is what the alliance specifically is built upon. And it's, I think it's one of it's my favorite aspect of the organization. Yeah.
Great. Collaboration is an essence. You said that either that music is made for being played with other people. It's not painting. It's not writing texts or literature. So it's a kind of social art, and I love these two. So let's talk about the Alliance for Women Film Composers. I would like to know the story of the starting of the Alliance. If someone can tell
I feel
us.
like you guys were there like really, really early in the mix.
I mean, I think it started, if you talk about the very beginnings of it, it was really, a bunch of women composers in a room in 2014. The official founders are Laura Cartman, who, she just had a fantastic year. She just scored both the Marvels and then also American History.
American Fiction. Yeah.
American Fiction. Thank you.
Wonderful
I was like, as soon as I said it,
yeah.
I was like, that doesn't sound right. American Fiction. Yeah, she just had a banner year, but she has been scoring, massive film and TV projects for decades now. And then Lolita Ritmanis, who is a force especially in the animation scene. One of her biggest credits is Justice League. And then Miriam Cutler, who is known as the Queen of Documentaries here in Los Angeles, someone I've had the chance to work with a lot, phenomenal composer. And then Chandler Poling, who is a guy, right? And he's also a composer, PR agent. And the thing I want to point out real quick about the Alliance is it's called the Alliance for Women Film Composers, not of. Because we never wanted it to be a club of women composers. We wanted it to be an organization made up of the whole community of people, of just human beings who are interested in, promoting and advocating and amplifying the work of women film composers. So there's always been men on the board. One of the earliest board members was George S. Clinton. Also Peter Golub, who was head of the Sundance Film Composers Lab. Both Chandler Poling and Thomas McHugh, they're both composer PR agents who have done amazing things for all film composers, and they've been instrumental in helping the Alliance since its beginning. So that is kind of how it started. Just, those four founders plus a whole bunch of other women composers like Star Parodi and, Diane Warren and I'm going to stop naming people because I'll forget people. But it started with that group, and they were for the next 2 years, it was kind of working, underground. And I think, Heather, you were involved at that point as well. There was like a luncheon at BMI. There was a few different things that were happening around town. But really the coming out party for the organization was in 2016, where we had a public open air performance at Grand Performances in downtown LA where there was, I think, 20 pieces of music, all by women film composers, including Heather. She had a piece on the program. And that was kind of the point where I officially got involved. I helped with the concert and then came on as executive director. And, that's when we launched our directory of women film composers. We launched our website. We started having more meetings. And at that stage, it was really, maybe there was, I don't know, Heather, like 100 people in the directory or 50 or something.
Yeah,
I don't know if you remember those early days.
Yeah, it was us. We just planted the seed at that point, and now we're up to over 800 people in our directory, I believe. And we're just growing and growing and finding our community, which is so thrilling for us, for sure. Yeah. So that's how it is. Yeah, go ahead, Kath.
That's how it started. I mean, running a nonprofit is no joke. And even today, everyone who's involved, whether you're the president like I was and Heather and Ally are now, or, part of our admin team, or a board member, everything is volunteer. And so these are all working full-time composers or people in the music industry who are dedicating their time to, keeping this going. And we're growing more, like, I'm sure, like, paid personnel is in our future, like it is with every nonprofit. But it really was just, people giving up of their time to, keep pushing this forward and listening to the community and finding out what programs we needed. So, first it was just, meetings and get-togethers. And then I think one of the first major programs that we started was a mentorship program where, people applied and the members who were picked were partnered with, one of the leading composers in our film industry, whether that's, Harry Gregson Williams or, I think Rachel Portman has done it, like a whole bunch of composers internationally who have been part of that mentorship program. And now we have another program, which I'm really excited about, which is called the Recording Initiative, where we give composers, and again, this is an international program. In our first iteration of it, we had composers from Colombia and from Canada and US and all over the place participating. And basically we're helping them learn the whole life cycle of going from composing a piece to, like, music notation and prep and Pro Tool sessions, all the way to having that piece of music, just like you did at the festival, performed by a live ensemble, and how to produce that session, how to give direction to the musicians in order for your piece of music to come out exactly the way you envisioned it. So, we're really trying to do practical things to empower our membership to, be successful composers. And Ally, Heather, I'm sure there's other programs that I've forgot to mention.
There's a lot of, in terms of programs, we also have this CARES program, which is going to start reshuffling into take a little bit of a different form, but essentially it's a program that connects composers with each other, like just on a really like personal level of like some, people that are mothers, people that are caretaking, family members and things like that. And it's basically a behind the scenes sort of way of like making sure that people have some like, support, emotional support in that regard. It's not like glamorous per se, but it's very important. And I know that a lot of people have found it, very beneficial just to be able to connect with other people who are caring for elderly parents or new mothers and things like this. And so they have people to connect with, and they're, I think as if you're a composer and you're working as a full-time composer and you're also like caretaking someone, especially for women, this often falls on women to be the, caretaker. It can be very difficult for people and isolating as well. So it's nice to have ways to connect each other that way. So we're also looking at trying to broaden that program a little bit in the coming year to find other ways to connect people also global, a bit more globally as well. Like if we've got people coming from London and they come to Los Angeles, that they know that who they can see when they come here and things like that, just sort of providing some pathways and support kind of thing. You know, what other stuff we're doing? We do a lot of support at like film festivals at Sundance, Tribeca. We're also in the future, we'll be looking at other major festivals at like having either hosting events and panels at these, making sure that we're providing a support network for women at the festivals. And also
And
just
visibility as well, to show that we're here and we're making things.
Exactly.
And I think that's a great way for us to connect with filmmakers and other creators as well, just by being present in these spaces. It's so essential.
Yeah. And Heather's like been like, you know, in terms of social media, I know that you started like a lot of the Instagram sort of stuff of, you know, each film festival, when we've got every film festival that comes up, looking through and seeing which women have films in the festival, whether they're short films or features or whatever, and giving them some social media coverage. Because all of this stuff is just, you know, it's the repetitiveness of seeing faces and seeing names is like, it's really important. I mean, they do that in the media all the time, sort of thing. So we're trying to, you know, provide that support for women where they might, you know, not necessarily be getting that from studios or always quite frankly have the financial support to be able to do that as well. So but it is really important. We're also doing like a lot of networking events. We had an event earlier this year with a group called Film Fatales, which is a women filmmaking group, and we're going to be collaborating some more with women in film here in Los Angeles in the coming year, as well as the DGA Women's Steering Committee. I know that we've got some meetings sort of coming up with that. So there's a lot of potential for getting women composers and filmmakers and producers and stuff in the room together to meet each other, you know, and just get to know each other, and hopefully that there'll be some nice, you know, collaborations that, you know, come out of that sort of thing. So it's just, you know, meeting and greeting and seeing who gets on with who kind of thing, you know. That's the way it goes in this industry. Yeah. What else? That's, I mean, there's a lot. It's a constant roll of events. You know, we just had our holiday party here in LA, which was a real blast. Great to see. And we had a lot of like supporting members, you know, which is really great because it's, you know, our composer members, but also we have supporting members who are male, you know, members of the community who might be like agents, or they could be other composers. But there's a lot of guys that showed up for the holiday party. It was so awesome. And they're like really like coming out and showing their support, which is just really wonderful, because it is like everything in this film industry really comes down to how you interact with your peers. You know, your peer support is so important, and it's so important to support each other, and to listen to each other's music. And, you know, what goes around comes around. You like want people to support you, then you need to be there for others as well. And I think that's, you know, what we're sort of trying to foster, really. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really, really important. I was thinking that here in France, I'm living in France now, and you know, our film business is really different because the country is very small and we don't export as USA does. So we have a lot of government public helps for filmmaking, and now if you want to reach some public help, you have to have 50% of feminine professional in your film.
So yeah.
Yep.
That's, I mean, that's great. I mean, they can do that in France. It's great. It's a little bit like that in Australia as well. Yeah, in terms of a lot of the film funding does come from government support and things like that, but it's you know, there's a lot fewer films, and they're like usually much smaller productions, but it is nice to see them trying to, enforce those numbers kind of thing. Yeah.
There's definitely been a push for parody here, in the States. It's become like kind of a popular thing on social media to have parody on film sets, so equal numbers, guys and girls. But a weird phenomenon that we have seen is that often, the composer aspect of it is just kind of forgotten about in that equation. Like, we've seen some filmmakers be like, we had an all-woman crew, and then you look at the composer and it's a guy, and it's like, probably a lovely guy who writes wonderful music, but we're just like, why didn't you, like we're part of crew, so I think this is why a huge part of what the Alliance does is reaching out to filmmakers, and because over and over again, we've seen filmmakers, like whether it be, somewhere on social media or just in conversation, be like, oh, there's women composers. Like, wait, like, how do we find them? And it's like, we are here, we've been here for a long time. Women composers have been here for a long time in concert music. It's, so it's just so important that constant, the constant struggle and work towards visibility, and just so people know we're here, we're very easy to find. We do a whole array of music. We do the big orchestral, we do the electronic, we do everything in between. So I think, it's going to take some time. Change doesn't happen overnight. And I think one thing we talked about with the Alliance at the beginning is that we hope, there's no need for the Alliance in 10 years time. And I think next year is our 10-year anniversary of the Alliance, and we're going nowhere because the work is still very much needed to be done. But that's okay. It's just now we have a really clear idea of the steps we need to take to continue the work of visibility and inclusivity.
I see some questions.
Sorry.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just saying I'm seeing some questions in the chat here.
I was going to say the same thing.
Oh, okay. So the first one was, what advice would you give to a female composer that is starting out in the film music business?
There's a pause from the interpreter, so I would like to translate this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Essa pergunta foi para as compositoras. Qual seria o conselho que vocês dariam para uma mulher que quer começar, né, no trabalho de compositora para imagem?
And I think,
go
for it. One of the things I would encourage you to do is just, if you want to be a film composer, just start doing the thing. It's just, I feel like, especially as women, sometimes there's a hesitancy where it's like, oh, I haven't done my first feature, or I haven't really done much, so I don't know if I can really call myself a composer. It's like, you need to put yourself out there and just start reaching out to filmmakers and start building those relationships and do the work. And it's okay if you did.
If you don't mind. A Catherine está dizendo que para começar a ser compositora tem que fazer, é a onda do fazer, de você começar realmente a se sentir uma compositora, a buscar fazer contato com diretores de filmes, porque essa é a ideia realmente, é de você entrar num projeto, e para isso você tem que construir uma rede de contatos com diretores de filmes, por exemplo. Mas o primeiro conselho é começar fazendo. Yeah, Catherine, you can go on.
When I started out, I had this background in music like Heather, but I didn't have any credits. So I would go to networking events and I would say to filmmakers, I'm starting out. And so many of those filmmakers were also starting out. So you can grow with filmmakers. I think all three of us have done that. We started, with some of our filmmakers, we did their first film together, and we've done all these great projects with them. Another composer friend of ours, Jean-Guy Bontemps, he just did the latest Transformers movie, a huge movie. He went to school with that director. They did their first projects together, and now they're on this massive studio film. So you're not the only person starting out. Your filmmakers are starting out too.
Catherine está dizendo uma coisa muito importante, que os diretores de filme também começam uma carreira. Então, a ideia é de você poder começar projetos com diretores de filme iniciantes. Ela estava citando agora, ela fez isso, e a Heather e a Ellie também, mas o compositor agora do novo filme Transformer, né, que é um blockbuster, ele foi para a escola com o diretor do filme, e isso fez com que ele teve essa oportunidade. Então, a ideia é de começar junto com o outro diretor de filme que está começando também. Yes, you can go on.
I would also say, like, you know, it's really important to obviously know your craft of composing and to understand, you know, your musical skills and stuff like that. But specifically for film composing, like understanding film and drama and comedy, and a lot of it is watching all the movies. Make sure you're watching films, and like a lot of different variety of films and TV series. Sometimes, like, I mean, I still watch TV series, not necessarily because I think I'm necessarily this is gonna be my most favorite thing that I want to watch, but I'm like, I am curious, like, how is that scored? How are they scoring that show? And like, why does that work, you know? So it's like understanding the craft of film scoring as opposed to just writing music and understanding music per se.
And being curious.
Yes. Ellie está dizendo também uma coisa muito interessante, que é de você se inspirar vendo filmes, vendo séries de TV, assim, vários formatos, né, de filme, e entrar no processo criativo, que é de fazer uma música para esse filme. É o tipo de... que nem a gente faz análise musical, né? A análise da música do filme, da relação da música com o filme, né? E a Catherine, né, acrescentou que sendo curiosa, né? A gente buscar vários caminhos. Heather, do you want to say
Yeah.
something?
I'd say it's really important, along with watching films, but if there are so many opportunities to participate in film festivals, even remotely, to watch short films, to find people that, like Catherine said, that are starting out as well, but to really know the language of film and to connect with people personally when you have an opportunity to see a film and say, I loved your film that you made. I think to connect on a human level and not connect, I think especially starting out, sometimes composers are so hungry for the work that they forget about the personal connection and that creative collaboration that we have with our directors as well. So to think about it, not just like, I need a job, but to be like, I want to make art with you. You know, I love your art. It could even just be, I love your art. You know, like, I love the way the camera person shot this film. I love what you did. You're an amazing editor, you know? Wow, the music you chose is beautiful. Like, it may be the most abstract version of appreciation of art. It doesn't always have to be a direct, I have a thing, let me have a thing from you. You know, it doesn't have to be, sometimes it's not as transactional. You know, sometimes it's just connectivity with other creative people.
A Ida falou outra coisa extremamente interessante, que é o lado humano, né, do relacionamento. Não é só de você chegar para um diretor de filme e dizer, eu quero trabalhar. Essa fome toda, ela não pode fazer a gente esquecer que é um relacionamento humano. Você trabalhar com um diretor, você tem que estar totalmente à escuta, né, das necessidades artísticas. E na hora que você for encontrar, é bom privilegiar o encontro humano, o encontro pessoal, tipo, sei lá, ir para projeções, festivais, e você chegar para um diretor, para um editor e falar, cara, eu amei o que você fez, eu quero criar contigo, entendeu? A gente não pode perder de vista que arte, não é uma coisa só de troca de dinheiro, troca financeira. E isso é muito importante, a gente concentrar essas relações entre o diretor, o editor e o compositor, a compositora, com esse intuito, né? Com essa ideia de vamos fazer uma obra de arte juntas.
And I think you know, at the end of the day, it's all about relationships and community. So, you know, building, like just as Heather said, meeting with people, like building those genuine relationships. When I first came to LA, Heather was one of the first people I met with. I still really clearly remember that conversation in a coffee shop, and it had a massive impact on me as I was thinking and kind of envisioning what I wanted to happen in my career for the next 7 years. And then so many of the projects I've gotten has been being part of filmmaker communities like Women in Film, Film Independent, New Filmmakers LA, and then the Alliance for Women Film Composers, Society of Composers and Lyricists, just being there, volunteering, helping, showing up. Huge part of, I think, success in film and in the arts is showing up.
A Catherine tá dizendo que tem que aparecer, né? Aparecer presencialmente. Quando ela chegou em Los Angeles, a primeira pessoa que ela conheceu foi a Heather. E ela começou também entrando em comunidades de compositoras, mulheres compositoras, mulheres músicas, né? E também grupos de filme, de diretores de filme, enfim. E ela realmente acha, e eu também concordo com ela, que a presença humana, realmente aparecer é importante. A gente, agora na hora do digital, é importante a gente não só mandar currículo, mandar a música que a gente fez, né? Também estar presencialmente ali. So the translator is back.
I can listen to you translate all day. It sounds so beautiful.
Thank you very much, but my English is not so good, I think.
Your English is perfect.
Marcus Souza is asking that, is telling that Rachel Portman was at our online Musimagem festival. It was awesome. Did you meet her at any events? How did it go?
I mean, Rachel is she's part of the advisory board for the Alliance for Women Film Composers. And I think maybe all three of us, or at least two of us, were on a Zoom with her when we were talking about the advisory board. And she was just such a joy to talk with. She is such a wonderful woman. I had no idea. She has like a degree in, Allie, was it psychology? She has a degree in psychology.
Like doing therapy or something. It's kind of really interesting. Yeah.
She has like a whole practice. I mean, she's just such a, you know, a kind of a well-rounded human being, and just has such a generous spirit. So it was a real honor to talk with her. One of our leadership team actually started getting a bit teary when we were talking with her, just because I think for all of us, Rachel has been a composer we've known about for a while. You know, she was one of the first women to win an Oscar, and it, you know, it's pretty special when you get to meet people like that.
Yeah, it's huge influence. I actually remember, like, when I was at some point, I was definitely like in my last year of high school, I feel like I don't even think it was a teacher actually said, like, oh, you know, it's going to be really hard being like a composer, like a woman composer. It's just like, you know, and I think it was literally that year that Rachel won the Oscar, and I was just like, see, it is possible. You know, I felt vindicated after being told, like, things would be really hard being a composer. Like, you know, there's no women composers. There's no women film composers. That's what they said. And I was like, oh. So she's a very, you know, important figure, I think, for many of us, you know. Plus, she's like brilliant also. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, that's great. One other question from Antonio Teoli. Oh, it's not a question. It's thank you so much for this really inspiring conversation, ladies on Musimagem. And Pedro Pereira também falando, amazing. Thanks for the conversation. Yeah, I think it's amazing that we are talking about great composers, women composers, that you are inspiring us with your careers, and you are helping other women to be inspired by you and by other great composers. And I think maybe the new generation, it will be easier for them to identify with women composer, and that's great. Here in France, we have a new media which is called Majeur, which is a catalog of all the professional women in music. So you don't have no excuses if you say you don't know any woman in that kind of profession.
Like a directory? You mean like a directory?
Yeah,
Yes.
catalog.
Yeah.
It's great. When I was in Paris last year, I actually met with a group of women film composers, and I'm blank. They have a name for their organization. I apologize. I'm blanking on the name, but it was.
Please find it. I would like to know.
I will definitely connect you. And it was so inspiring meeting up with them and talking about the work that they've been doing. I also wanted to mention that while I was president of the AWFC, and this is ongoing, I met with a whole group of women composers from all around, South and Central America. We had Mariana Calagari, who I mentioned before, from Brazil. One of my closest friends is Maria Linares from Colombia. And then, we had composers from Venezuela and Mexico and just all around the place. And we all got on a Zoom together. And it was incredible because there were some women on that Zoom who didn't know that there was another woman film composer in their country. They thought they were the only one. And this is something we want to keep, building this group. And because I think it's just so important to support each other. And something that was really interesting that the founders of the Alliance said at the beginning of the process was that, like, they would go to, award shows and they would see each other. But there wasn't really like this connectivity. It was almost like that there was this like kind of weird concept that there was like only one seat at the table, right? Like there could only be one woman, and there was like not encouragement for everyone to work together. And one thing we've been really trying to abolish is that concept. Like if there's only one seat at the table, we'll create a new table. Like it's like let's get rid of that concept. There's so much more power in collaborating together and being connected. And I mean, Heather and Ally, you were there at the beginning of those like BMI award shows where you guys saw each other. Do you want to speak to that experience a bit?
The BMI award. They're still tricky.
We still have a long way to go. We're not. We still have a long way to go, but we are advocating for each other and finding ways to make room for all of us. And I think that is so important for us to advocate for all of our voices in the room, women composers of color. We all, if we can advocate for each other, it's a valuable, we can do this together, I think. And I think the more that we feel like we're not on an island, the more that we feel like we have each other to support, the bigger our community grows, and the louder our voice becomes, which is essential, because I want to hear dynamic stories. And by hearing and seeing dynamic stories, we need to have dynamic voices telling those stories. Like it makes it so much more full, when you're exploring more than one POV on a film or one approach. And I think that it's a real thrill to see how we can really change the landscape. I think it was a big deal. There was a moment where, as an independent composer in my own space, I thought, well, I'll just keep my head down and keep working, and that'll be what I can do, and the more time that I've been scoring, the more I feel it is our responsibility to advocate for these new voices in the room, and to the point where it doesn't feel like new voices, that we're all able to be in the space, and it's messy sometimes. We're not going to always do it right, but I think that if we are like genuinely making the effort and genuinely pushing to have that, I think it's such a thrill. And I think we're not there yet, but we're pushing the needle a little bit more time,
But I will say, like, as far as, the PROs, like the team, the film and music team at BMI are wonderful. They are very much like there to advocate for us. And I know, Heather and I both know that Trace McKnight is, very much on our team and wanting to see the change in the world, as I know that Jen Harmon is over at ASCAP and Erin Collins is at CSAC. They're all wonderful women who are, PROs that are really, Heather and I were up in Vancouver on a equity panel with the three of them. They're all saying the same thing. They want to see the change. They want the support, they want to see women and people of color represented in the room and be at the table as well, so but it's a big ticket item. The studios have to come to the table too, there needs to be change from the top down, and it takes time, but we are not giving up.
Yeah, as you said, it's been wonderful to see how, so I mentioned the BMI just because the three founder composers were all BMI composers and would see each other at the award shows before, this kind of initial coming together in 2014. And I'm an ASCAP composer, and I would have the same experience at the award shows, it's been a process of just like kind of getting rid of those divisions of like one person against another person, and just being like, we can do this together, and we can celebrate each other's things. And it's been,
now it feels like we all look for each other all the time.
Yeah. That's totally the change, right? From kind of side-eyeing each other to actually being like, hey, like we're all here. And one crazy mayhem moment now at pretty much every award show is trying to get the picture of all the women composers in the room, which is always kind of a herding cat situation, but it's always amazing just seeing, this group of women composers kind of spilling off the red carpet, because there's so many of them that we can't fit them all in the picture. And that's just been an image that I've seen over and over again, whether it's at ASCAP or BMI or SCL or, at the Grammys or the Emmys or the Oscars, there's more, like there's still work to be done. But if you look at 10 years ago, like that, none of this was happening, none of them. And so and one organization we haven't really talked a lot about, but is also doing exactly the same thing, is the Composers Diversity Collective. And it's always wonderful seeing them also at these different, industry events. And then our two organizations collaborate a lot on events and panels, because I think it really is the goal for, like our specific goal is advocating for women composers, but really the overarching goal of all these organizations is inclusivity and support of all voices.
Correct.
One question I have is if this awareness, this consciousness arrived early in your lives, because I remember my first composer meeting at Globo. Globo is a huge channel in Brazil. And we were like 12 years ago, we were like 25 composers on a table, and a director and a producer, I don't remember. And I realized I was the unique woman, the only woman. I didn't I didn't see it. So it began from there, and from the willing to have more colleagues around me. And I didn't find. I only found when Marcos Souza began to call other women, and it became very difficult. So it's something that came very late in my life, and I would like to know when this awareness, when this consciousness arrived in your lives.
It's for me, I started off as a composer in the jazz world, and that was a pretty lonely space, to be honest. I had a lot of, great dudes around me who were really supportive, but there were not a lot of women composers in that space, even women performers in that space. I was just talking to a jazz saxophonist, Nicole, who's brilliant, and she was saying basically exactly the same thing Allie said about her high school teacher, where she was telling her teacher, in high school and college, I want to be a jazz sax player, and the teacher was like, "It's going to be really rough for you. There's no women jazz sax players. Like, don't do it." Like, she was just told, "Don't do it. It's going to be really hard." And we were going through the list of like fellow jazz musicians we knew that were women, and it was so small. It's like we knew all of them because it's not a big group, especially women instrumentalists in that world. And when I was in New York, I went to a jam session at Smalley's, and I was waiting for one woman to go up and jam, and women would come to the bar. I was sitting at the bar, and I'd be like, "Are you going up? Are you going to sit in?" No one. Like the whole night, I stayed till 3 a.m. So that was a really kind of a rough start for me. When I was in the classical world with my mom, there was a lot more women, and when I went into the jazz world here in the States, it was rough. And so by the time I made it to LA and into the film community, there was more, I met Laura Cartman and Lolita and Miriam, and my mentor up in Washington State was Alex Shapiro, who she introduced me to all these. So it felt like there was more progress happening in film than in jazz. So it was a little bit of a relief when I came here and I met Heather. And so, for me, I've had an easier time in film than in jazz, where I started out in the States. How about for you two?
Okay.
I mean, but also to be clear, Kath, this is a time period, we're talking a time period of like less than 10 years as well. So,
Exactly.
I mean, this is new. I mean, it's the same. I think we're all of the same, like, generation of like not having female, like, representation to look at. And so I think, it's a new thing. And I think that's I think that's why all three of us are so passionate about the Alliance, and like just being able to have the community. For me, even in the like literally in the last like 8 years, like has changed the way I think about so many things. And even though it's like later, it's like, it's fine. The support now that we have for each other is great. And it's it just makes me like, want to change it even more, and I think that at this point in time, like at my stage of my career and my life, I feel like, it's more important now for me to make sure that like younger people, like it's different for them, so, and I think it is changing. And we are so in touch with a lot of our young members and up and coming composers, and that's just rad. It really is. What do you reckon, Heather?
Oh, it's so much. I think about, like the biggest thing for me is like I'm learning now, like what kind of coming up through like punk rock music and playing in bands and stuff like that. I think about the internal biases I had about not wanting to be, I don't want to be known as a girl bass player or woman composer or any version of that. And now I'm like, wait a second, but I am that. That's my full truth. What's wrong with being, like, this is a situation. Like, this is my identity as a woman composer, as a woman instrumentalist. Like, what biases did I have towards like myself, like towards other women that I'm discovering, that I'm learning about now? And we have a lot of interior work to do as well in our
a lot of undoing of narratives and the ways that you've been taught. And I think even if you grew up in a household where you have mothers who encourage you to do these things, the gender bias is is so deeply ingrained in society that we don't even realize it. And it's funny, I think we're definitely, I mean, we're obviously also at that age where we're thinking about these things, you know, like, and reflecting in ways that, you know, you don't when you're younger, kind of thing, right? Yeah.
But yeah, so it's very interesting to sort of look at ourselves and look at how we can like change that outlook. Because I mean, I want people to say, like, go on the internet and type in woman composer and see somebody, you know, like, I want it to not just be like one person, you know. I want to, you know, like that. I think that's really important. I think that's true for all representation. We want to see ourselves, and so we're making those steps to hopefully do that. I have to, you know, be kind to my younger self and all my weird self-loathing biases, and say, like, you know, there's space for us now, and to be kind as we're coming up and seeing new composers find their way in the ranks. And hopefully we're just able to be here to celebrate the steps we've made and the new work that we're seeing moving ahead. And yeah, we all, I think, really want to see big change over.
We want to see big change, and we want it to be normalized too. You know, like I just think, you know, right now it's a party when there's like, you know, an award season where there's one woman or maybe two women in a category with three guys. And it's like, but seeing, you know, a category of composers, all dudes, is just like, well, that's normal, you know? And we don't want that to be normal anymore. We want the, you know, we want the diversity to be normal. And I think we're still a long way from that. I think, it's great that it's a massive part of the conversation, but the fact that we still have to have a conversation about it is frustrating. You know, we want just this to be the regular thing where there's, and I think a big part of it too, like we all talked about how, you know, growing up, we didn't see a lot of women composers. Hopefully now that younger people are seeing a lot of women composers at awards or, you know, just on projects, whatever, on social media, hopefully there'll be a bigger influx of women continually coming into, you know, women and all people coming into the scene. And so it's just, it's going to help out when we just have like a bigger population of women overall, you know, at the schools, you know, applying for projects. But, you know, the challenge that we're constantly facing, especially at the Alliance, is, you know, on this upper echelon, you know, in the indie scene, we're seeing a lot of women composers. Often at Sundance, there's like, we're close to parity when you look at the composers represented there. But when you look at studio projects, when you look at the upper echelon of television projects, and definitely with the tent pole, you know, the big expensive films, we still just, it's a very unbalanced representation there. And it's just a reminder that there's still a lot of work to be done.
Yes, totally. Before we end, I would like to know what are your next musical project? What are you working on now? What will you do? We want to follow your news here.
I have a film that's going to Sundance, a narrative film about Reality Winner, who worked for the NSA and helped. She brought to light the Russian involvement in the last election. So it's a great story. So I'm pleased about that, and a film about opioid crisis and in prisons with Melissa Etheridge. So 2 different projects there that are coming up, but Winner is coming to Sundance, which I'm very excited about.
We all are.
Great. And you, Ellie?
Yeah, I'm working on a documentary feature right now for Hulu about the fashion designer Diane von Furstenberg, which is a really great project. I'm sort of in the midst of that right now, but that'll be, I think, out early next year sometime. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Great.
Great.
I'm on the narrative thriller film for Lifetime, so I'm scoring on that project right now. I just finished a short doc, which I'm really excited about. It's it's about a family who escaped the war in Ukraine and made it here to the States, but they had to leave their cat behind. And the youngest daughter was just devastated. So basically the whole community pulled together to get this cat out of the Ukraine.
Wow. Oh my God, I love that so hard.
And it's just,
Sorry.
I mean, if you follow me on social media, you know that I love my cats. I have 2 cats. All 3 of us are cat people. Allie's also a dog person.
Me too. I have 2 cats.
Yeah, I have 2 as well. So that's great. And then I'm also working on another fabulous short doc called Shelley's Leg, about the first queer disco in Seattle. And it's a fantastic story. It's by the filmmaker who did Potato Dreams of America, which was an award-winning narrative film about his life. And it's also just a really exciting chapter in the LGBTQ plus community in Seattle. And Seattle was where I became a film composer. They raised me, the film community in Seattle raised me into the film composer I am today. So I'm really excited about that project.
That's cool.
And I get to write disco music. So
Great. Thank you very much to all you 3. It was a pleasure to know more about you 3. And it's great to know what you are doing for us women composers. So thank you very much for what you are doing. And we will here at Musimagem, we will follow your news, and we'll forward to know what you're doing and what your actuality are. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. This is great. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
thank you so much.